You're on the ATP Project with just your host Matt today, and I got my mate Ken Ware with me today, and we're going to be talking about all the miracles that Ken does for really crook people in wheelchairs and that sort of stuff. But I'm really interested in what Ken can do for the good people that want to be awesome. So today, not only do I want to talk about the miracles that you can, in a bad situation that you can achieve, but I'm really interested for people that are doing all right, like athletes or executives or entrepreneurs or just general, anyone really. As someone that's good, I'd love to know what you're capable of doing. Meaning, if someone's in a wheelchair and you can get them walking, if someone's awesome, you can make them absolutely amazing, surely.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And that's a great question. And of course, that was my initial, when I first started to do all this work, more than 30 years ago, as a selfish athlete. That's exactly what I set out to do, trying to be the best I could possibly be. And, discovering some things along the way that I've seen was very important. And then as time has went on, the realisation of that, the effectiveness of that in helping people with, chronic issues and that to be, get over those chronic issues and so on. And whilst we've become much more known for our work we've done with spinal cord injury, and I think one of the last surveys of all the top 10 best results they've ever accomplished for the people with spinal cord injury, NeuroPhysics has 8 of them. So
wow!
It's we're pretty well up there with that. So there's a lot of publicity that surrounds those because it's a huge thing, spinal cord injury. But
it's an impossible thing that you're doing.
Well, that's right. And in perception of some people's eyes, and the young fellow that we had this week. Because people have been getting results, so the more that happens, the more the faith builds up in other people that this can actually happen. So by the time they come to us now, there's already this belief that things are going to change, and that augurs their system really well. So now we're seeing things unfold at even faster timescales than what we've seen in the past for people with spinal cord injury.
Brilliant.
So it's like every time a person comes to us, it's almost like a new world record for, the timescales that things come back online.
That's amazing, because that really, you see that all the time, like that minute mile or whatever, these things that we think are actually impossible. Mm-hmm. Once you actually see that it is possible, all of a sudden, that whole handbrake that the brain was putting on has been removed, and it's amazing what people can achieve. That's
right. Socially, it bifurcates, information gets shared through the internet, so the acceleration of those things is so much greater. And so even young people growing up today, my God, when I look at what kids are doing on skateboards and slack lines and things like that, and how rapidly those things have developed over the last 10 to 15 years. When I was a young fellow, skating and everything, if you did a good move on the skateboard, you might get a pat on the back by one of your mates or something. Yeah. But today they Snapchatting it, and they're sending all around the world, so they're getting all this feedback about hundreds
and what's possible,
hundreds of likes, and then they're seeing other people doing amazing things. So that mirror neurons we have, they work really well in terms of being able to produce these things. The mirror neurons. So we have mirror neurons in our brain that assist us when we're teaching a person how to tie a rope, for example. It's the mirror neurons in our brain that do that. Okay,
so it's your ability to watch and copy and learn it,
and share social things like all that sort of the way that certain beliefs and perceptions get developed, and so they're very and they were discovered in the mid-80s, and you might have heard Richard Dawkins, where he's talking about the memes, the meme machine, the memes that coincide with genes, and because Dawkins believed that there was this like a central governor that was in the brain that did all this. That was before they actually discovered mirror neurons. So that's how we mirror other people's behaviours, and there's huge consequences there both ways, where and athletes will mirror other athletes' skills, and to be able to do that, and watching footy players playing on television inspires young football players to want to play like that, and they go on to become better perhaps. But there has a rogue aspect about it as well when it comes to the disease and disorder. So it's well known that people can actually start to mirror the symptoms of another person who is close to them, even though they don't have. All the testing shows they don't actually have the disease, or there's no mutation in the gene and the like. So it some huge consequences for this. So
there was a famous case study with a bloke, medical student, that was stuck in a refrigerated train, and he thought he was going to freeze to death because he was stuck in a refrigerated train, and he thought, as a medical student, I'll document the process, it'll help others. he documented the process of his death, and he had all the symptoms of hypothermia. And when they got there, it wasn't refrigerated.
That's right, correct.
He convinced himself that he was going to die. And so, again, then for people that have set a bit of a barrier of what they're capable of achieving, not just, structure if you've had an injury, but people must have this ability to do more than what they believe. And I know with teaching, when I try to teach people new ideas and new concepts, I find it a hell of a lot easier to teach people that are open-minded than people that have got a whole heap of information they first have to unlearn before they can take on new stuff.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, so beliefs are very powerful, of course, and, again, they work both ways. I really believe that we're going to win this game today, and, that can go a long way, or I anticipate, so anticipation can come into that pathway as well, and that can go a long way for accomplishing that.
Yeah.
But if I believe I'm sick, and I believe that I anticipate that all these things are going to take place, well, they become self-fulfilling prophecies. So beliefs are very helpful in all the good ways, but they can be very destructive in all the bad ways. Yeah.
So I've noticed a pattern in my naturopath clinic, but also now I'm working with quite a few athletes and that sort of stuff as well, but also in myself. The funny thing is I've been treating lots of other people for about 20 years, and I'm pretty good at treating other people. When it comes to treating myself, I have so much bias and I have so much weird beliefs stuck around why I am the way I am, that even when people are showing me or telling me a new way, I'm kind of very skeptical because I think I know myself better. Now, I've recently drawn up a bit of a mind map of a bit of what I looked at as not so much of a hierarchy, but I actually just documented the process of what happens when we're exposed to a stress, regardless of whether it's a physical, mental stress. But in this instance, I was looking more at toxic exposure, pollutants, and that sort of, and infectious sort of stuff. And in the diagram, I've got the mucosa, I've got the immune system, we've got the hormonal cascades, I've got the liver running first pass metabolism. In the bottom tiny left-hand corner, I have a picture of a brain and the brain's involvement. And I was in the middle of doing a training with these guys the other day, just showing how the innate defense mechanisms work and just showing them how all of these things are occurring immediately. Like you can't separate the systems. I said, these guys are all occurring immediately. And I looked at the little brain in the bottom left-hand corner of this diagram and thought, well, it's actually not really that important when it comes to this. And then when I had a look, and then what I did is I listed a lot of the symptoms that the brain would create as part of a survival response. And they are things like fear or long-term memory, gut instincts, intuition, anxieties and panics and that sort of stuff. Now, well, the reason why I'm telling you this is someone that's stuck in this innate defense mode or stuck in survival mode, their brain will be manifesting symptoms of worry, pain, fatigue, and all that sort of stuff, and be stuck in that mode. The brain is sending out all these signals saying, digestion's not important, shut it down. Libido's not important, shut it down. We're stuck in survival mode. When I went and visited you the other day, I got a feeling it was one of the first times for a long time that my brain just shut the hell up for a sec. And that must be a lot to do with what you're doing, huh?
Absolutely. We say there's no privileged point of observation, that it is a system. There's the brain and central nervous system. It's one complete unit, which happens to include the brain. But we say nothing in there has any more privilege over any other part of that. So, but it is that mental noise that you're talking about, Matt, that self-reflection, self-evaluation, perception of self within the environment and how you're nested in there. So all that's triggering the immune system in lots of different ways. So blushing, for example, that's the immune system's response. That's histamine that comes up. So we blush as a result of that. But I call it, there's a lot of things that fall into the category of what I call emotional blushing that's taking place on a 24/7 basis with people. This bigger, stronger, faster world, they're just more almost permanently in a fight or flight state. A state that was only ever meant to happen if a lion jumped out the bush.
How will I know if that's me? How do I know if I'm stuck in a survival mode and I need to be rebooted? Because that's what it's kind of like. It feels like when I did that I did a very small introductory thing with you the other day. Like I'm not going to claim that I did anything amazing. But for me, it made a big difference. There's certain symptoms that I've been dealing with for a long time that just totally disappeared for a period of time until I got back into my bad habits.
Yes.
So I'm going to work more with you at that. But I found that was absolutely mind-blowing how many symptoms of mine were this resistance, this pattern that I was just stuck in. And when you asked me to just stop thinking, which is something I struggle to do, you stop thinking and let your brain listen to what's happening in your body, a lot of those things just disappear.
Because it's like anything, you know, if you put your focus on the pain that's happening in your shoulder, for example, it creates a positive feedback loop. So it's like holding a microphone in front of a speaker. That's positive feedback. It's in different context to what most people think about the word positive. But our systems are much more like the thermostat on your stove at home. So it gets set at a certain temperature. If it goes to go past that temperature, the system gets negative feedback, and then that brings it back down to that state. So our parasympathetic nervous system is much more for that negative feedback.
Yeah.
But of course, you know, if I'm putting my awareness on my pain or my anxieties or the feeling I've got in my gut, for example, those things tend to exaggerate. Now, when we're dealing with people with spinal cord injuries, for example, they might get all of a sudden an awareness that there's a little bit of a flicker in their leg, for example. We're doing the opposite of, we want them to really embellish that, to really focus on that for the very same reason that it amplifies the experience that the person has.
And when you say that, it'll amplify the signals going from the leg to the brain?
To the brain.
To finally say, hey, I'm here.
That's right.
Weird.
And the brain says, oh, this must be important, we better do more of this.
Yeah.
But when you reverse that back onto a person's sense of self about their disease, the disorder, and all the positive feedback loops that take place, it's helping the system maintain a certain state. Now, you know, I guess the animal that we're dealing with here is the fact that we are designed to maintain our existing patterns of behaviour.
Yeah.
It's in our best interest as a survivor to be able to do that. So, unfortunately, though, that our brains don't have a bias about what's good or bad or indifferent. It's just if I behave in a certain way and I elicit certain feelings and have certain sensations about my feelings, about perceptions about my environment.
And you survived because of it?
It's in your best interest as a survivor to maintain patterns of behaviour. So we get out of bed in the morning, we clean our teeth, we do certainly. You're not aware of the pattern you're using to shower yourself every single day. It maintains those states, but that works across all scales.
Yeah.
So you have responsibility to certain things. So they're patterns of behaviour and responsibility.
And so through natural selection, I mean, we're here because our ancestors survived or adapted ways of surviving. So we probably inherit quite a few of these survival techniques, some of them not suitable for today's society.
Well, that's right. But they, it's just the adoption of things, how we adopt. Because going back to what I was saying before about the mirror neurons and how we'll start to adopt things, we can argue that, it's like having a chameleon type of gene where it's in our best interest, where there's predator-prey issues here, where it's in our best interest to blend ourselves into a society and not be the standout one that the predator is going to get. So we'll tend to massage ourselves into a group of thinking and all that sort of thing to be socially acceptable and a whole people. But if that involves you're around people who are sick and who are, talking about their things like, you can be around their family members like that and develop anxiety disorders even though you don't have any known cause to have anxiety. The fact is that's learned behaviour that you can adopt.
So what you're saying there is that, so if you are an elite or if you stand out from the crowd, you should expect a certain bit more anxiety about that because you're a bigger target?
A bigger target.
Definitely in Australia where we've got the tall poppy syndrome.
Well, that was what I was going to say next, Matt. I mean, Australia and New Zealand are very famous for that tall poppy syndrome, and it's really, I spoke about that at a conference at Cincinnati Children's Hospital last year, the medical system, and it's one way of actually bringing things down and levelling the playing field.
Yeah.
But as an individual athlete or an individual person who wants to inspire other people and to be the really best they can, we certainly can't be thinking like that. And then so it's just sort of breaking those molds and those patterns.
So how would that manifest in an elite athlete or in an entrepreneur or something that suddenly found themselves standing out from the crowd and being a target? Would that give a lot of people naturally, would that create fear or doubt, or would they self-sabotage maybe to kind of bring themselves down?
Lots of things, but it produces a huge braking mechanism for a lot of people where they start to, I guess, dampen their ability because of fear of actually being in that state and accomplishing things. And how is everybody going to see me now that I'm famous and will I still have the friends? So there's a lot of that sort of bantering going on, and
And things like fears of failure and that sort of stuff, like those people that have got that, oh, I don't want to try just in case I fail and people witness, or that sort of thing would be part of that as well, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Fear of failure and fear of success too can be just as much part of that, So, nobody goes to anything to lose, but then again, did they really plan to win? What's going to happen after get an Olympic gold medal, for example? And we see plenty of cases where that planning post accomplishments like that wasn't made, and now those athletes have depression and all sorts of things as a result.
Now, also too, like, so people that are stuck in this survival mode, a lot of that's about self-preservation on a survival level. It might also be a certain self-preservation on an emotional level as well. Then, for example, self-sabotage is something I see all the time. You see it a lot. You see these people that are just about to break out of their shell. They get maybe a bit of pain because they're, like that lobster that's overgrown their shell. It hurts for a bit and then they explode out to the next phase. But I find that self-sabotage for a lot of athletes, and I find self-sabotage from a lot of executives and a lot of students and young people and that sort of stuff. They really can't handle the pressure of potentially succeeding. I also wonder too, when you're in survival mode, when you do something and you survive, you acquire a new survival trick. And next time you feel yourself in that same situation, we run on gut instincts, intuition, long-term memory, and pretty much autopilot. What did I do last time I was in this situation and I survived? Well, if every time you're getting to that point and you self-sabotage and fail, it becomes a level of expectation maybe.
Well, it becomes a pattern of behaviour. That's right. So breaking that symmetry can be quite difficult in the adults, certainly. And that's what if changing of behaviour is a very dynamical process. You can't counsel a person about it. You've got to be able to see, give some evidence of how they're behaving, how they're interacting with their environment in some way, and then helping that person to make discrete online corrections to patterns of discrete things that can be leading to sort of some big problems that they're actually having in maintaining themselves and feeling themselves that within their environment, that they're in control of their environment rather than the environment controlling them. So we can only ever be in one of two possible states. We're either in a state of growth or in a state of protection. You can't be in the middle. It's like trying to be happy and sad at the same time. So you asked me earlier about how do you check that out. Well, background tone in a person's body, for example, the vigilance that's in their system. And you recall the other day when we were working together how you were standing up with your eyes closed and I was moving you around a bit. That those first sensations that you got when I started to tip you backwards. Like it's that fear. Now, in a healthy system, they might be initial bit of fear like that, but they'll adjust very quickly because they have information. I gave you some information. I said I'm not going to drop you, so that's a bit of information.
But my belief system was that no one can hold me.
That's right, exactly. And but it's the same with other person, even half your size, where you're doing that sort of thing. That whole trust. But that's when you see that level of vigilance or that overreaction. That's how they're poised within their environment all of the time. It's not that's their default. It's not that they suddenly invent that response because you're doing it. So it's just a way of seeing how overreactive can they actually let go. You see the tightness up in their legs and that hyper protectiveness instead of just being able to go with the flow.
So with people that are resistant to change, people that don't necessarily get the results you expect or that they expect or that they want, do you find is it more likely to be a physical barrier or a mental barrier? And I made an assumption that there is people that don't get the results I expect. I assume there'd have to be some people that don't get that.
It is rare. I mean, but it's a bit of a false. The data can be falsified a bit because we screen pretty good these days. So we always say we can't save the world. We can only help people who really want to make.
So
those
which
changes.
ones don't get results? Is it usually a physical body stuff that's stuck, or is it a mental thing where they just cannot let their brain accept that this could change?
It's one and the same thing. How we're represented physically is how we're represented emotionally. Emotion, energy and motion, or that which sets in motion. We think, we feel, we act. It's all energy and motion. We talk about love, hate, delight, and nausea, and all these things as to how we might express emotion. But it's all energy and motion. The idea is being in control and authority over that energy and motion, so it's not leaking out all over the place. But when people they define themselves by their disease, for example, like, I've got MS. That's ownership over something. And that's the language that they actually use. So they have a whole heap of people that are around them that are, think about it. So how's it going today? And all this support, they've got all these people doing these jobs. So they're everything around them, their environment is related to that particular disorder.
Yeah. And they stop becoming a person, or the person they were, and now they become MS.
But it's the characterisation of things. Why did a system that was cruising along, going okay, and then all of a sudden, something like that happened? That is we're always basically the 3D image of the perceptions, the beliefs, and everything we've been making since the day before, and even before we were born, for that matter. But the fact is that's self-made. We're not a victim of these disorders.
Yeah,
we
aren't those disorders.
We aren't those disorders, and that's right. But it's something has gone rogue. And then when you see, all the studies that I've done, and we look at the common denominators with all these people with neurological disorders and a whole heap of other things that stem from that, and the anxiety disorders and how that shows up in the physiology, of course. When you look at it's autonomic nervous system crisis. That's the key thing to it. So their sympathetic nervous system's been just long term.
Yeah.
And now people can do that to themselves without even knowing, and they can be. If you look at the posture of kids today, where they're texting, and you'll see them. They're hunched over. The trapeze muscles are engaged, which is very responsive to the sympathetic nervous system. So if we get anxious at all, we're going to tense up in the trapeze. But they're engaged like that. And even though they've got a smile on their face and they might think they're having fun, but that's not the symptoms. Symptoms always mean the same thing. So it's not... They don't. And
you can't separate the systems. Like I was saying with that diagram, I mean, I think I've mentioned to you before that, compounds like interleukin-6, which is they used to always talk about as an immune chemical, but now they've realised it's released immediately from mucosa, from nerves, from all over the body will release the same chemical at once that says panic. Or worry or stress or survive. And there is no real hierarchy. But what I do find, though, is it's really hard. I don't know if I'm a bit biased because of my personal stuff, but I got a heap of personal stuff. But that my brain, I didn't realise just how much of my lack of progress with certain things was just my brain believing I am a certain way, or my issues are caused by a certain thing. You know what I mean?
But like I said, Matt, it's there's laws of energy, fundamental laws of energy conservation there. It's easier to maintain existing patterns of behaviour than to develop new ones.
Especially when we've survived.
Totally,
and we give ourselves a pat on the back every time. Just like creating an antibody against a virus. Next time it comes in, you know how to attack it immediately.
Yes, yeah.
This is how autoimmunity, for example, might happen. You get a little bit confused, and then your body's stuck in that survival mode. So... in this instance, a big thing that Ken you did for me the other day, and just to give people a bit of perspective, there's some people I've seen on your YouTube videos. So you see these people doing massive tremoring, massive amounts of tremoring and chaos, and it looks quite distressing and all that sort of stuff. When I did it, no, I don't have spinal cord injury. Again, we just did a very, very simple introduction so I could feel a little bit about what happens. I could not believe what happened when you told me to stop frowning and I shut my eyes for some, and then it was all cool, and I'm like, yeah. But as soon as my eyes shut, I had no idea where my body was.
Yes.
I had no idea how to make my fingers touch each other without my brain controlling that process. And when you made me close my eyes and then explain to me, we're going to calibrate your body. We're going to just let your hands tell your brain where they are.
Yep.
I got a feeling it was probably the first time in my life that I had actually shut my brain down and allowed my hands to send a message back to my brain. And what happened? I broke out in a massive sweat. I had this full body reaction just from my hands telling my brain where they were.
That's right. Proprioception, that's right. I mean,
I don't think I've ever had that before, in the sense that I've done meditation classes and things like that, and I used to ask questions to the instructor and say, how do I know when I'm meditating and I'm not using my imagination? Because I said, you told me to go to, find yourself in this river or whatever, go to your happy place. And I'm sitting thinking, yeah, it's easy. I can imagine myself lying in a river. Am I meditating? With you, all of a sudden my brain just said, okay, no, I'm taking a back step and I'm just listening now. So that's the go?
That's right, Matt. I mean, I'll just go back to the tremor issues a bit. I mean, it's the natural resting state of the brain is chaotic, and we're looking at once we start to, we inhibit that chaos because we have apparatus in the brain that do that and create the background tone in our body to maintain our skills. But when you sort of allow yourself to sort of let go and transcend that under stimulation, we start to see the tremor emerge, and then it starts to increase in value and so forth. And all it's doing is mirroring what's taking place up in the cortex itself. But the tremor displays some certain dynamics. Then we can see when it's more related to trauma in the bird. But a healthy person would just do that no problem at all, and everything just looks nice and flowing. But we can actually see the noise that's in the tremor, and it's the noise that's in there that's very much interconnected to the disease or the disordered state of that person's system. And like when we get elite athletes who've broken down, and we see that when they start getting into those sort of states, that there's a tremendous amount of noise and anxiety that's in there, and all that's got to come out. And as soon as that is able to release under the right sets of conditions, so it needs parameters, it needs guidance, that there's got to be some grids that it's got to work through so it makes sense, and also that we can measure the appropriate improvements to it. So it's not just about tremoring and all that sort of thing. No. And there's been a lot of embellishment about the fact that you're doing this and it's releasing all the emotional baggage and that's just definitely not true. I mean, it's showing you what the state of the system is. Now this gets into meditation. With meditation is great because it can help you to learn to control thoughts and those sort of things, executively and the likes. But it's a little bit like I'd describe, if a snake was curled up in the grass and the anthropologist coming along, oh, look, we've found a new snake, and we don't know anything about that snake until you poke it with a stick, until you perturb it. And then you say, right, now I can see the snake's behaviour. Yeah. But controlling that behaviour, that's a different story altogether. To put that in a bag, that's a new skill set, another skill set altogether. Yeah. So we need to, the other day when you were practising your proprioception and trying to bring your fingers together, we're seeing things there about your left and right hemisphere, how they're cross-talking to one another, how good they're collaborating on things, and you can start to see hemisphere dominance through those sort of processes.
Now, I could cheat, If I wanted to, I could open my eyes and watch my hands hit there, or I can go fast and use, I don't know what that
speed.
is.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
so is that something that we do in everyday life to compensate for this and bypass
sometimes people, they go fast and they find that there's still an error, and it always goes to the degree of error. Like it's at sometimes a tiny little error can be, but what you see is the behaviour of the person when they're going slow. Going fast is like watching a DVD and fast forward. You can only pick up select bits of information. You'd never be able to tell the story about what the movie was about in full. But when we go slow, we start to see more the moment to moment. When stress reaches a certain threshold, we can see when people's fingers start to get closer together, how they might be over-evaluating. They go really well until they get to a certain point, and then they start over-evaluating where they are, and you start to see all this inconsistent
expectations and things.
That's their character. That's what they're doing every day out there. They're over-evaluating something that should be so simple. If a child was doing the same thing, they'd be having a whale of a time. They'd be laughing if they made an error. There would be no big deal. But we just can take things so seriously. But proprioception is really important because it's where my body's in space-time and where things are at a distance from me, of course. But the reality of it is that as far as our survival is concerned, that proprioception and where my body is in space-time is really important for our survival in lots of ways. And but what it is, it's perception. And perception is just nested within our perceptual landscape of how I perceive the world in general. So if you see errors in proprioception, that's one way of being certain that there's errors in all percepts that person's making about the reality of what their environment means to them. So there's subjective evaluation of the environment is not what the innate system perceives the environment to be.
So that, because in the gym and that sort of stuff, or when I work a lot with these athletes, and I'll see similar patterns like they'll throw the weight up, to the power, because I'm working on my biceps, I'm going to really squeeze it up as hard and fast with intensity. Then I'm going to slowly go back and hold it. These guys get a lot of injuries and that sort of stuff. Is that part of it, or?
Yeah, well, it's the fact is that they're demonstrating it for moments there. Like you've got to transfer everything out into life. If you look at the behaviours that the person's doing in eliciting those sort of things and impregnating those type of percepts onto the environment. So I'm lifting up a weight that I should have total control over because I'm the one lifting it. Yeah. Yet when you see a lot of their behaviours, the symptoms that they elicit, like the clenching of the teeth and all those sort of things that do it, the aggro look on their face, perhaps. Yeah. If you're walking along a park bench in the park and you've seen a person sitting on the park bench looking like that, you would immediately, your recognition of emotion and your brain would tell you there's something seriously wrong with that person.
Yeah.
When these people are looking at themselves in the mirror, the brain doesn't even know what a mirror is. It knows at one level, that's me, because when I wink my eye, it does too. But it sees the emotion on that face. So it's like this feedback loop where it's wanting to shut itself down. But the point is that they're putting a stress on their system that they should have control of. They're exhibiting basically a lack of control and authority over that.
Yeah.
And then they're doing something often. So you're thinking about the switching on, switching off aspects of it. Human beings are the only animal that exhibits those type of behaviours. We lift something up on a table, and put it down. They're switching on and off. Yeah. People doing repetitions, there's this big effort to come up and then it goes back down. So it's this big spike in arousal, then emotional withdrawal, spike in arousal, emotional withdrawal, and the bandwidth as they're doing reps keeps increasing more and more. And then eventually they just let the weight go, and it's like letting a rubber band just go. You have no way of predicting how that's going to land on the table. What we have to bring about is this sense of seamlessness when they're doing things, where there's no bias between lifting the weight up and lifting it down, where you maintain an emotional steady state. So the stress on your system is increasing as you're lifting that weight, but you're maintaining emotional composure. And then you take it back down without any bias about the coming in and going. So you're showing that changes in your environment and stresses in your environment, that you actually have emotional control over the arousal at that point. Now, there's nothing unfamiliar about that. I mean, if you watch the behaviour of those elite sprinters, those men and women getting into the blocks for the 100-metre final at Olympic Games, one of the things you'd first notice is that they're calming themselves down.
Yeah.
Nothing is more critical to being in the zone than that trigger going off at that 100-metre final. You can catch up a little bit in 200 metres, 300 metres, but those athletes have to be so in the zone that they've got to be able to respond to that signal within 15 to 16 milliseconds. The startle time of the average person could be anything between 50 and 80 milliseconds. So you know what that would cost at a 100-metre final. But then when you see them sprinting and you watch that footage in slow motion, you'll see their jaws are relaxed and everything just flows. Yeah. So there's no tension. If they get anxious because you've got...
They're not hitting the ground harder to go forward more, are they?
No. They're just... So it shows that optimum level of performance is manifested through our most composed states.
Yeah. And like if you don't know the weight of something, for example, when I'm working in my backyard and I've got a log or something there, I don't know the weight of it.
No.
When I approach that log and I need to move it, the first thing I'll do is I'll get a good grip and you go an easy kind of...
That's right.
You have a controlled motion. That was a bit of a weird hand gesture there. Talking about controlling a log.
That's right.
Anyway, that's just for the YouTube people. So what you do is you basically approach it with an element of control and no...
assessment.
Yeah, exactly. Where if I go to the gym and I see the numbers on the weights and I think, okay, so normally I can do 12 reps of this as a warm-up quite easily and I'm moving up to a higher weight, you'd be more inclined to think, this is going to be heavier. I'm going to have to attack that more. But if you didn't have a number on that weight, you didn't know what it was, you didn't know exactly, you had no point of reference, like what you'll see with a tree or a rock or something. You don't actually know the density of this item. Right. So you've got a bit of an idea, can my hands fit around, that sort of thing. But when you do it, you'll gradually go into it because you don't want to create injuries, you don't want to create jerkiness. And what you're actually doing in that instance is getting data back from your body to your brain saying, you think you're capable of doing this or not? So I would do something like that. And then it's quite surprising what sort of stuff you can actually move in the real world compared to the gym when you actually do later on find out what these bloody things weighed or, So and so with life, and just because what I'm trying to relate this back to is not just injuries or physical performance, because I think most of us have got kind of some mental injuries there that we might be able to use these techniques to bypass. I can't believe how many times I speak to people that are stuck in anxiety states and feel like it's important to hustle and grind and dominate. Now, that's what you're talking about with the mirrors and the angst and the aggression on people's faces. I learnt from a very young age that you got to work hard. Dad used to come home and he'd set up his surveying plans on the dining room table, and he'd be cranky because he needs to get this stuff done, but it was always done with angst. He didn't want, he didn't want to be doing it, and he wanted to make sure that we all knew that he'd rather be with us and not doing it.
Sure,
but we learn that when you're doing hard things like work and exercise, you're doing that with angst. You're doing that with intensity. And then you can deserve your reward later where you can relax. But I think that is a major problem with us getting stuck into a routine and stuck into a pattern. Because if you're stuck in the sympathetic nervous system, which is the survival one, the sympathetic nervous system does long-term memory. It does gut instincts and intuition. It does fear of that of the future. You're not in the now. You can't ever live in the now, and therefore you can't have balance. And that's not going to be your best way to be an elite athlete or an executive. You can't go around fearful and worried about doing things because of a survival mode you're stuck in.
That's right, man. It become more of a contemporary thing when you're talking about athletes in particular. The whole no pain, no gain, and pain is weakness leaving your body, and all these type of slogans out there. Right back in the 80s and the early 80s there, the sports psychologists back in those days, it was all about trying to teach the athletes their sense of flow. And they would say things like, whilst athletes sometimes, an inexperienced coach or athlete might, give up their, not pursue it because they see that there's got to be a little bit of diminished performance for a little while until they develop these new control skills. But when an athlete is in that flow state, if you ask people who win their 100-metre final or something at the Olympic Games like that, and they know what to say to satisfy public curiosity. If the media ask them, or say, what does it feel like, Matt? They'll say things. But in reality, for them, it was just an unfolding of an event where they're just in the zone and everything just unfolds. Their awareness of themselves, the coming back from their body is just, it's not so acute. They're just in that zone and that flow state. And it's like what we need to do to be in that state on a more, accessible basis. So it's like a 24-hour thing. So if a person is training in a way where they're spiking their arousal and emotional withdrawal and it becomes their pattern of behaviour, the system when they walk outside, because the immune system's following that. The immune system follows that around, your emotions around like a puppy dog, and your perceptions like
and so and that innate immune system, that's that inflammation that's causing so much damage.
And so therefore their baseline levels of glucocorticoids will start to increase over time. And I've seen horrendous, like 21-year-olds with, they're 3 times what they should be. And I'm just like, oh, my God, when I was 21, you're out surfing and doing all these cool stuff. Nothing like that. But it's that whole, attitude about what you're saying there, that I've got to work really hard and I've got to force things to happen.
Yeah, and this intensity, and you see it, on social medias and that, like I'm still on Instagram. I've given up most of the others, but Instagram's got some pictures, so I like to look at. But yeah, you'll see it, the hustle, the grind, the dominate, the sacrifice. There's all this talk about, it's all about intensity, and even things like high intensity interval training. That doesn't have to be done with angst to be intense.
That's exactly. And that's the whole goal with athletes, is teaching them to be able to absorb higher levels of stress and demand, but in a very composed, organised manner. So they've got authority over that. So, when you look at weights, the weight example, the resistance, that's just information coming in from the environment. Your body just goes, this is 5 kilos, 10 kilos. It's just more bits of information. So we're looking at using that as the mechanism to be able to measure what happens when a stress, because you can put stress on the system through those processes, and seeing how does that, what levels of arousal does that elicit? Are they overreacting to this mild stimulus, which typically you see that they do, and then it's detraining all those responses, and then bringing about the responses that are much more desirable in terms of their ability to control, emotions and control arousal.
We really have to take our brain out of this. Like you mentioned histamine before, in regards to blushing. So for people out there, like to put that in perspective, like you would have heard how you can buy antihistamines that are non-drowsy or drowsy. Like histamine makes you alert. Histamine is recruited within the nervous system. So the same chemical, that corticotropin releasing factor that tells your body to release cortisol, will also activate histamine on nerve endings to increase your alertness. Also, in case of exposure to poisons, venoms, parasites, it's one of those flushing mechanisms that can remove allergens or pollens or something. So this is what we're saying. Your body can't afford to wait to see what your stress is before it reacts. As far as you know, you may be manifesting symptoms of allergy in the form of an hay fever, sneezing, itchy eyes, histamine, scratching, itching reactions, or maybe a nervous rash. You know, people talk about, I get this nervous rash. So that's what you're talking about for the histamine, the initial blushing. So when does anyone know whether their allergic symptoms are associated with a survival mode stress-related, thing, or an actual allergy?
Yeah, like our systems.
And which comes first?
Well, that's right. But it's a sensitivity to the environment. Like, where if you're looking at where people become hypersensitive to their environment because they've induced that state themselves one way or the other. So, when there's histamines around, then your body has to produce antihistamines and all that sort of thing to negate it all. And then eventually, just like anything, if you produce too much insulin, your body develops insensitivity to insulin and develops insensitivity to anything that things are overexposed. So if all of a sudden too much antihistamine, next minute there's an insensitivity to it, so then you've got to start ingesting external artificial antihistamines to try to cater for it. But a lot of the things that are created today is that our system's in its nice healthy state, it's quite capable of doing things, and you might get a bit of a feeling of a temperature suddenly increasing, your immune system working in the background, dealing with the things you don't even know about it.
Yeah.
But when all of a sudden you've got this overreaction to things, and your immune system's starting to turn rogue and start to over-respond to things, and it becomes an associative experience too, like a person. We know that all works well if I still to this day, from being in the dressing rooms in my footy days, and you smell the denk rub in the room and you feel your arousal come up because it's the smell. Somebody's going to walk past me with denk rub on, and I feel exactly that same type of level of arousal.
It's actually breath mints that do it for me. It's just like,
But you see that there's an associative experience there to something. So people find themselves in a situation where a person might trigger that, and their body just goes into that pattern of defence because that's what it's accustomed to do.
Yeah.
The immune system is incredibly intelligent, like this, whatever it is, 65,000 moving parts basically. But we appreciate the intelligence of our brains because we can have evidence of that. I can lift my glass up, I can do things, and do math, and do whatever. But the immune system is pretty much on the same page because it's making decisions, it forward plans, it does all these other sorts of things. It has memory, as you've already said.
This is what we learn as we're learning more and more. Things are less defined. For example, like I mentioned, interleukin-6 before as a chemical we thought was the immune system. We've got a group of cells that we think are immune cells, but now we're realising there's all these other glial cells, there's other cells within the brain, there's other cells all over the body that manifest exactly the same chemical reactions as the immune cells, and now all of a sudden we're starting to go, maybe we're just a big human body.
Yeah, we've become too discriminate about things in that matter because they're going to find eventually that a lot of these things are multimodal.
Yeah,
they can they can function and produce lots of different functions. There's not one sort of thing. We can certainly see, when people have brain injuries, for example, we can say, oh, that has to do with, social memory, or that has to do with something because then that's not working in that person anymore. So there's been a lot of contribution.
But your stuff is showing there's other ways around it. So we what we believed was possible was the nerve or the spinal cord will send signals, but when that's because that's what usually does it. When that's not there doing it, you've worked out that the body is capable of finding other ways.
Well, the body-brain system, everything is about that in that respect. Where we've got to, to me, the spinal cord's the easy part. Getting around everything that's going on in that upstairs there for that person, that's the more difficult part. Because they were a person before they had this spinal cord injury. They're not defined by that injury.
Yep.
Well, I don't like people. He's a paraplegic. He's a quadriplegic. I don't like that sort of language because they're a person with a spinal cord injury.
Yeah.
But when that happens at that point, it's the value and meaning that person puts on it, as opposed to cats and mice when they've lesioned their spinal cords to prove certain things about central pattern generators, etc. They recover quite reasonably with because they don't have the beliefs, the perceptions. They don't get told that they're never going to be walking again and all that sort of thing. Now, spinal cord injury like that, we can just simply use that as more like a metaphor to describe so many other things that take place. What a person is told in a vulnerable state about who they are, what they are, what their potential is, that can have very eroding effects on that person's sense of self in the future.
Yep.
So when we're treating people with spinal cord injury, just like everything else that we're treating, we're helping that person to improve their sense of self. Under perturbation, under a stress, you can talk about that till you're blue in the face. Perhaps 40 million neurons might be involved in that. When there's a stressor on that system, what we call that perturbation, so perception, action, and cognition all need to line up at the same time to be able to say that we can have evidence that neurons in that brain are firing differently to how they did before, because we can actually visually see that there's been a change of behaviour occur.
And just to try to simplify the mechanism of action of that, the way you seem to do it, it's like, is it just taking the brain out and asking the feet to tell the brain what's going on?
It's just parts of the brain, Matt, where you're becoming the observer of what's taking place. So, the anterior cingulate, those areas of the brain that if you say to a person, people say all these thoughts keep coming into my head and blah 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 and so on, and without being disrespectful to them, we will say, well, how do you know that?
Right.
So, because there has to be an observer, or you wouldn't know that it's there. And we mentioned the other day that crazy people don't sit around all day wondering whether they're crazy or not, because they've actually lost that point of observation.
Yeah.
So when we're more focused on that observer, and empowering that state. So how you know that you're anxious is all part of that process. Error detection. You went to say something to a person and then you realise that what you said was wrong, and then sorry, Matt, that I didn't, what I meant to say was, well, where was the little person sitting that knew that what you just said was wrong to be able to make that correction?
Yeah, right.
So see that there's this reflective thing that something comes into what people might call mind, for example, and then they become aware of that. If they put awareness on that thing, then it gets a jersey, and then it gets positive, create that positive feedback.
Yep.
So the mind is just really the brain doing its job.
Yeah.
So most of the information that comes in from the outside world, the sensory information, gets converted into some motor response, and then a percentage of it gets converted into patterns of thought.
Yep.
What those patterns of thought are going to mean is that typically they will be in a maintenance type of fashion to what that person typically thinks about, because it's helping them to maintain their patterns of behaviour. Most people, we could argue speculatively that people would have 65,000 thought, feelings, wishes and ambitions throughout the day. The problem is it's the same 65,000 the next day. And they keep reinventing themselves in that state. So if there's anything rogue about that, that's what keeps happening. Something's got to break that symmetry. It's got to come into that system to break that symmetry. And it's like if you see a still pond and you drop a stone in that pond, you see that even though it was very symmetrical to begin with, now you've dropped a stone in it, you've broken that symmetry, and it allows new patterns to emerge.
So there's definitely patterns.
There's patterns, and that's what we're saying. We need to break the symmetry of the system to enable new patterns of behaviour to emerge. And that's through this whole, what I'm talking about, perception. We're always perceiving the environment. We need to be able to see what that actually looks like, measurably, in terms of how the person's responding to some known bits of information that are going into their system in a noise-free environment, a safe, supportive environment. So we perturb that system.
To take away some fear, take away some anxiety.
Look at how they're behaving. Yes, so fear and anxiety might be part of how they respond to this mild stimulation. And then we've got to be looking at detraining all that. So perception, action, and cognition. So they need to be acting on their environment, initiating something, so that we can actually see, through that initiation process, and then how they're perceiving all those events as they're occurring, and then the person to be able to be coached how to cognitively control all those things that are going on. Getting rid of, pulling out the weeds, getting rid of all the things that are more desirable for them to hang on to.
So do you think, things like traditional methods like Tai Chi's and yoga and those sort of things, a lot of those is that sort of concept of slow things down, get your body doing weird things so it can send a message to your brain to say, hey, we're kind of doing this, or here we are in space and time?
There's a lot of things that come into a lot of those other modalities and that, Matt. And I'm always saying, like, I didn't invent a whole heap of stuff, because you can find similarities in a lot of those things. With Tai Chi, it's all about flow and movement and those type of things, which is an integration of the body brain system and that moving in space time and the person sensing the control. So initially you go to try to do some of those Tai Chi movements, and you're a little bit unco and the likes, and then all of a sudden all this pruning occurs where physical emotional pruning occurs that enables you to start to move in a much more fluent manner.
Yeah.
And to me, that's very valuable. And all I'm saying, a lot of times I'll say that this is what we're doing is almost like Tai Chi with weights.
Yeah.
where we're just putting a stress on the system.
Yep.
And then helping the person develop that same sense of flow, regardless of where that stress is coming.
And does that resistance from the weights reduce some of the noise? Like, for example, just having that little bit of weight attached to that limb, does that reduce some of the...
Well, it gets the priority, like it gets the intention of the system. So that's what we need to have, as opposed to sitting there and I can be talking to you as a counsellor perhaps, and you could be agreeing with every single thing I'm saying. Yep, that sounds like a good strategy, Ken. But in the background there's all this noise going.
Sometimes adding weight makes things easier. Does that make sense? Like sometimes I find it's really hard to have any sort of technique or form or control. You add a bit of weight and it's like, okay, cool, I've got something to push against.
That's right. Yeah. It helps to line things up a lot more, So, and that's the point, is like getting that stimulation to sort of see how things line up, or where's the tipping point? Where does it actually, at what level does it go to when the stress just becomes that little bit too much and the person starts to lose that sense of control?
And what's that? And that the tremoring and all that sort of stuff?
No, that's just basically they'll start to, there might be a bit of tremor, a bit of disorganisation in there. Not necessarily, the type of tremor we were talking about before, but you can see that they start to lose their emotional composure and the like. So it's that whole tipping point is something that, we spend a lot of time studying, because it's unique to each individual. You can't that's why you can't generically... prescribe exercise to people and just throw the blanket at all the people in the footy training sessions and doing all the same sort of things, because every single person's perceiving those events differently to one another.
Yeah.
But so we need to be able to find it. So when it comes to arousal, and we talk about concentration, for example, once concentration goes past a certain threshold, then energy gets shifted more to what you're thinking about rather than the task at hand. So we see a diminishing effect in the task. So that's why overthinking, we talk, acquiring skills acquisition is much more about having nice, almost like ninja type of thoughts, really softly assembled thoughts, where there's quietness in there, so the system can take much more notice of what you're trying to accomplish, and do all the pruning that's necessary to get contrast about what you're trying to accomplish. So it's like if you're trying to thread a very small needle, for example, you're having an attempt at it and it becomes a little bit frustrating because you can't get it because there's too many degrees of freedom there. So we know intuitively we'll take a break and we'll, have a little bit of a pause and then calm ourselves down, and then we go back and we'll have another go at doing. And then we see that we're much more successful at doing that. Right? So what happens up in the brain when we're actually having that little bit of a pause is that the goal and objective remains alive and well in the sense. I'm trying to thread this needle. So it's a goal and objective. That's when the brain does start to organise events. So it starts to tell different neurons, okay, you shut up, you come online, you do this, do that, and it gets contrast. So it prunes it into something that's much more going to be more successful in accomplishing what that goal and objective is. So collapsing, for example, you're trying to get something and it just doesn't go right. Let's just say we're trying to teach a person how to walk again, for example. This blows up on the big screen, the fact that they might stumble and fall over. That's not a negative thing. That's something that actually has to happen because the system's trying to accomplish this goal. Something's not quite right. So it needs to collapse the existing structures to be able to bring forward the ones that are most likely to be successful.
And then while you're pausing, does it analyse that data and
Absolutely.
say, this is where we were in space and time, this is what happened, and then let's reset and readjust and do it again.
Like I said, bringing forward the operations that are most likely going to be successful in accomplishing that goal and objective.
So at ATP here, I got Steve-O, who's a mate of mine that's usually doing the podcast with me. He's great for me. He works with a lot of the tech stuff with me as well. Steve-O's like fully left brain. He remembers everything, knows everything, but we debate or discuss how these things, work together. What we find works really well, we go and gather a whole heap of data and we go and learn and try to remember it all. And then, as you see here, I draw up my little mind maps and that sort of stuff to get a bit of perspective. But what we often do then is we then just go away and we re-adjourn in a week
Mm-hmm.
And then we'd come back and say, man, hey, what did you think of that stuff? Like, we'd just do little things like, how do you think, how cool's that? You know, and then we'd just start talking. It blows my mind how different we often are.
Precisely.
But we have these amazing little epiphanies and just go, oh, now it makes sense. And what happens in that instance? What's a good example? I will learn just a new trick or a new thing that I did not know, a new scientific fact. Steve-O might teach me, or or they might just discover it. And we go away and go fishing, or relax, or get into my garden. Well, usually when I'm out in the garden or in the middle of the night when I'm sleeping, what happens is this new bit of information that has now gone into my brain's trying to work out where it sits and the relevance of it. And if I have like a little aha moment, I got it. What happens is all of this stuff that I've learned right from year 8 science through to the most high-tech papers that's recently published, and everything starts to make sense. All these data that I've been carrying around, all my experiences, knowledge, stuff that I've read that I'd totally forgotten, though I thought I'd forgotten, all of a sudden I get one little bit of information that brings it all back together. So is that what happens when you allow someone to kind of body to try to do something and then you actually teach it how to do it? Does all of a sudden it just start bringing in these resources and suddenly things start making sense?
Like, it's always computing. You know, again, there's some survival aspects about it. Like I said, it's but you described it perfectly, Matt, with what you said about taking that break, walking away from it. So your brain then uses that information, then it'll start computing. It'll put it into relevance in context with everything else that's going on. Is this right? Is not? It does all this filtering in the background. Yeah. You don't even need to have much input into it. And even when I'm talking to people, giving seminars and everything, and people get all concerned, I'm not going to remember all this. You say to them, don't try, just sit there. Sit there and just be open and just take it in, because it's going in. Yeah. And then at some stage, just let it get in there. You might not at some executive level, conscious level, you might not be able to repeat what's said, but at some stage, all of a sudden, something will come out of your mouth. And you go, oh, gee, that sounded pretty cool. I wonder where that came from. So
it's all in there somewhere, but physically we have the same sort of abilities. So in our body, it's like,
oh, totally.
We learn to walk and all that sort of stuff, and then all of a sudden things start we compensate and end up walking a funny way. We never actually stop and go back to that baby stage and learn to walk again.
And that's right. And when we're dealing with complex disorders, or you're looking at things that have gone wrong, because that's what I'm saying about the system becoming too symmetrical. Yeah. It's too it gets stuck in some state.
Well, people talk about balances on and off, but you're kind of on and off all the time, are we? Or
it's sort of always in the background. There's always things going on, and something will get perk your attention up, and then you sort of might be responding to that. But basically, by enriching the environment that a person's in, so that's what it helps to increase the complexity within the system. So disease, disorder, a sudden loss of performance ability, it's a loss of the system's complexity. So complexity isn't complicated; it's just complex. Well, it's not complicated, but it's complexity. So we need to always look at increasing the complexity of the system. So by giving it new skills, enriching the environment, and doing things, standing on the skateboard on the dumbbell, to try to get some balance, you're enriching the environmental experiences that the person's having, and it enables the system to become more complex. Out of that increased complexity, there's increased levels of awareness and attention to things, even without the person really trying to do that. Yeah. They start to notice things more in the environment. So sensory, when people become too foveal focused, and if you watch them, a lot of the people doing their marathon runs, and they're sort of looking down towards the ground, and so that's an energy conservative state, because by looking up, all of a sudden, through the visual system, you're taking massive amounts of information. That's costing a hell of a lot of energy to process all that visual information. Yep. So it's more economical to look down. But what you're doing is that's sensory deprivation. Yeah. And sensory deprivation definitely leads to a lot of the disorders that we actually see.
Man, I used to come up with some of my greatest ideas while swimming. And I always thought it was just because I couldn't write the bloody things down. I always thought it's just typical. It's just going to come up with this great idea now where I can't actually type it or write it or anything, But that's probably just because I was staring at that blue line and got rid of all that other rubbish out of my head. Hey, have you noticed? Do you think endorphins may play a role in confirmation of your new tricks. What I mean is, every time I go to your place and see these people, they are all really happy. I don't know if it's just because we've got a camera on them or something. No, they seem like really happy. And there's definitely an endorphin. And after your treatment with you the other day, I definitely felt those sort of things. But in life, when we survive a stress or that sort of stuff, we do get that rush of endorphins. Does that give us that confirmation that what we've done was right, or is it?
Got to be a little bit careful with endorphins. Because it is it is all part of that innate survival mechanism to pump endorphins.
Because sometimes it's pain relief for injury, I suppose.
It gives me a sense of pain, so I can actually get myself to a safe place and the likes. So we're actually trying to not do that.
Okay.
And we're trying to not get adrenaline and all the association with endorphins. So what you see about the state that the person's in, that's just the removal of the other stuff.
Just zen.
It's just the removal of all the other types of states that were dominating. So it's not that
because they all look like the Dalai Lama. They're sitting there giggling about their spinal injuries and stuff.
And it's just that they're developing a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
But we certainly the learning to control arousal means that because if you start to continually produce levels of endorphins in your system is going to desensitize to that. And then over time, you're going to have problems with that, So it's always about that. So all these people are doing is that because we're going through the process, their body's under stimulation. When they're reaching the point where the stress is on their system at an optimum, at the maximum level, and that's when they're developing this sense of self. So holding that stress there, visualize yourself standing up, and the system takes a lot more notice of it because it's got this input, this stressor into it. So. That aspect of things, so they develop a greater sense of self and confidence within their environment. So that's all you get to see at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's right. So after my little thing the other day where we just calibrate just around the neck or something, I'm not sure exactly. I don't want to tell people what we did make up some words for you. But the first thing I noticed, I've had this recurrent shoulder issue that disappeared. I had a lot of scalene sort of issues and jaw stuff that disappeared. Which was things I was thinking about when I went there, structural things that I had been wanting to get resolution for and hadn't had any luck with other treatment modalities. Other stuff that happened, though, were weird, okay? So, for example, heartburn and indigestion, something that I thought was directly related to the foods I was eating and my posture and stuff, like just totally disappeared for a period of time until I got back into my old habits. And then other little weird things like lower back and ankles and things like that changed. So there's a lot of other weird things that had been chronic issues of mine that just disappeared. And how long was I doing that with you for?
About an hour.
Is that right? It felt like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But I don't know I couldn't tell you how long it was. It was one of those weird ass things. I felt, that was crazy.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar too. But I when I'm working with people, like the time, oh my God, the time's up, and to me, it just feels like
because you're living in the now.
Yeah, you're just very, very present with it. But all because what you experience in there, because it's a system, as we talk about, you can't. It's like a big cog, smaller cog, smaller cog. You can't tweak any one of those cogs without affecting the behaviour of all the other cogs.
Yeah.
So if you're changing the system in one way, at some point it has this change all the way through. And that's why we're saying we can use the one mechanism to get in to see perception, see what's going on there, alter those perceptions online, and as a result of that, we can see that at some scale there's been a change of behaviour in the system that has and it's a scale-free system, so it means there's a change of behaviour taking place at every scale. So people have come to us for their back issues. And next minute they'll come back in, and one day, and I had a publication about this one particular woman as a case study, and she reported that she said, so does this help with Graves' disease? And I said, why is that? I was thinking that maybe she had a friend with that and something, and she said, because I've had that and for for 3 years, and I went to the doctor the other day to get my regular checkups, and they found that there was no markers for it and everything was normal, and so I'm off the meds, and that's an example. So a lot of people don't report things to us that they actually have because they're there for some primary issue.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they start to see that all these other things have changed. So it's how much that everything is ordered around what they perceive might be their back issue, but that's connected to everything else that's going on in their physical. So every single cell in their body knows exactly what every other cell is doing all of the time.
Yeah. So with you looking at executives and you're looking at entrepreneurs and things like that, people that are working hard with a goal, a business goal or something like that, what I find is there's certain patterns that you see with these people, in particular the successful ones, seem to have a pretty good balance. They seem to be able to, they work hard, but they also seem to either that work doesn't feel like work for them.
Exactly.
Or they balance out that hard work with their own quality time that they've created.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about with your, what you do for an executive. You can do some a pretty intensive stuff with them to change them, but are there things that you can teach them in the long run to keep good? Because I know for me, for example, one very small session made some big changes, and I worked pretty hard mentally and physically to go back to the way I was. Meaning that I believe that I should be more I've got to be working, and this is actually, I can't be feeling like Zen. I'm at work. I've got to show people that I'm struggling or I'm working harder than them. And then in my office, it's like I've got to spend a lot of time at this desk and type and create lots of stuff. Doing that and getting back into that zone kind of took me away from the place that you put me into in that 1 hour. Admittedly, it took a week to go back out of it, So if I was to be an executive or an entrepreneur and come and see you and get an intensive, acute reboot, for lack of a better word, do you then teach them long-term ways of maintaining that?
Yep, absolutely. They have a full program that they then need to, to continually, be developing. It's not a stagnant thing. It's just something they need to continue developing. And as that program develops, there's higher levels of perturbation. They get to, the program itself just elicits a much more deeper understanding of self. When you're doing one set of 30 super slow like you did the other day, you know how difficult it was with that really light weight to go slow. Well, imagine doing that 30 repetitions, like 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. And then you start to see that all these other emotions like impatience and all this other stuff starts to come up. And impatience is one emotion that very much governs our behaviour in lots of ways, and it can elicit some pretty nasty responses. So it's purposely putting people in a situation that's most likely going to expose these underlying anxieties. Well, they're doing it themselves, and so they can avoid it any time they want. They can pull out and not do it. But it exposes all these deep-seated emotional states that are giving rise to negative patterns of behaviour. So when an executive person, if they choose to sort of want to look at improving themselves, first thing to do is just get rid of any noise that's in the system, any competing information that would be stopping them from accomplishing that goal, helping them develop a much more robust sense of self, in being impervious to perturbation from the environment at the highest possible level. So that augurs them well then to be able to go into any business meeting and they're feeling really secure within themselves, and they just tend to project that type of aura about themselves. They walk into the room and and they say, well, this guy looks like he's going somewhere in life, and or this woman looks like they're going somewhere in life, and it's that whole sense of self, as opposed to looking like the victim. And
in the early days when we first started up in my working life, and my sister, she's quite entrepreneurial and that sort of stuff, but very different to me. So she's like exact opposite to me. Like she was well behaved and very well structured. Hear this? Probably not. She's also very different to me. Yeah, she'd be doing something else. No, she mum listens, but she in the early days she gave me some books to read about. Because I was talking about, I don't know if I want to be a naturopath forever, sitting in a room. I can only help one person at a time if they do what I say. I think if I make products, I'll be able to help more people at once. That was my thinking. And then she's going, but to do that, you've got to be an entrepreneur. I went out to other companies with my ideas, and I was pretty much told by them that I was unemployable, just with the personality type and that sort of stuff, that if I'm going to do it, just do it myself. Because I got a high ideas of what I think things should be done, especially in regards to products, because I know what I can do to make things work. Now, so I go and talk to my sister, who was a successful entrepreneur, business person at the time. He probably knows me really well. Known me all my life, really.
Yeah, that's right.
Or most of her life, all of my life.
Yeah.
She's older, you see. So basically, she gave me these books with these questionnaires, like, are you an entrepreneur? Or do you have what it takes? Do you? And it was like, man, and I'm reading this book, and no, I'm not. I don't love work. Like, I don't want to. Actually, my whole goal and motivation to be an entrepreneur was because I was lazy. I wanted to work hard and then not work much. I actually wanted, no one's going to pay me to read a book, walk on the beach, go fishing while I think about it. You know, that's why I figured I've got to have my own job. I've got to build it myself. The questionnaires that she gave me that said, no, you are not an entrepreneur. You do not have what it takes. All of these other books then she gave me were skill. So these books highlighted my weaknesses, and then she helped me with a lot of other books about time management, structure, left brain organization. The end result of that was I believed, oh my gosh, I don't have what it takes to be an entrepreneur. I have to be like that other person that was an entrepreneur and learn everything that he did and copy his. And for that created a lot of angst, that created a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of am I worthy and that sort of stuff. But also, before I read all those books, I was a really balanced dude.
Yeah.
I was actually like kind of really happy. I love my fishing, I love the training, and I love doing all that sort of stuff. And in amongst it, I did some naturopath stuff, enough to pay the bills. And then all of a sudden I read, oh no, to be an entrepreneur, this is going to take dedication, hustle, grind, time management. Like little things in this book was saying, why would you mow your lawn when you can pay someone to mow your lawn, and while they're mowing your lawn, you can be there working on your business. In your business, you're worth $300 an hour, and that bloke's worth $30 an hour to mow lawn. You waste an hour mowing your lawn, there's an hour you're not doing your business. You kind of get stuck into this thing. At any moment that I was thinking about doing something for myself or getting any sort of balance, I was thinking, oh my gosh, this means I'm not going to be an entrepreneur. Now, when I was by myself, I didn't care.
Yes.
But now we've got staff, we've got people relying on me, we've got wife and children, I've got business partners and all that sort of stuff now. I feel, oh man, I've really got to be stuck into that horrible mode. And it's all in that sympathetic nervous system mode. And now, after 20 years of doing that, I feel really stuck. The funny thing is now my brain doesn't let me believe that I'm allowed to be balanced because that's not putting in my everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how would someone, I reckon there'll be a lot of other entrepreneurs or not successful ones, like people that are stuck in a place. They got, because to go from 0 to 100, 0 to 1's the hard bit, and then you go from 1 to 100 really quickly. So those people that are stuck in that phase because their brain will not let them. Is this something that using your treatment, you can rattle that loose?
Yeah, because it all goes back, like I said, everything we see, we get to see so much about this person in those initial responses that we see. So what we see there is how they're perceiving the environment all the time. So what you're talking about there is what you perceive that you need to do to maintain the status quo around here, all that sort of thing.
Or expectations of other people, what they need to see of me.
That's right, exactly. So now it's okay to sort of at one level to be able to have some responsibility about that, but it's how, and that information is very important because what you're saying is true, that there is a lot of expectation, but that's not the point. It's how you deal with it.
Yeah,
that's the point. So you can't change the circumstances a lot of the time that we're involved in, but what you can do is change your attitude towards those circumstances, and then it's just sometimes you just need the tiniest little bit of tweak in the right direction, and it opens. And even just by what we call, talking about going through the grids with all the different machines we use, because when we're coming in through all these different pathways, they elicit different emotional responses. There's different associative memories that's dedicated to certain schema up in the brain. There's areas there that are highly protective. So if something comes into this space where, these fibres in my pectoral muscles, they're very sensitive. So if I'm going to protect really quickly. If that same stress came to my shoulder, I'd probably use my shoulder to bump it away. Yep. So it's what we call path dependence. It depends upon where it. So up in the brain, there's obviously different things that would deal with the stress differently if it was coming to my shoulders or what it would to my chest.
Yep.
But in amongst all that, there's all some associative memory. So this area here is very personal space. It's very much intimate to us. Now when we sort of perturb that area, we can sort of see again how people are overreacting to things within their environment, and eventually just by learning to change those overreactions, again, that systematically changes everything going on about the person, how they generally persist. So when they come back to work, they're faced with the same things, but even without even thinking about it, they just tend to be able to function, which is what gets reported to us all the time. Oh God, I was at that meeting the other day, and it was a similar thing. Like normally I'd be really this and that, and I couldn't believe how composed I was.
Yeah.
And so, well, what was the outcome of that? Well, I dealt with things better. When I took more notice of what other people were saying, and that saved me so much time and having to go back and ask, what was,
Yeah. And what happens in that instance, if you can just let go of all that noise, then all of a sudden you're listening to understand, you're not listening to reply.
Yeah.
Which makes you much more efficient.
Precisely. That's the thing. And, like who we are can be so loud within ourselves that it's covering up our ability to be able to take in the information we need to keep evolving to the level that we'd like to evolve to. So, and it's just being an open system.
Yeah.
Like an open system, it's continually adaptive. It responds to the environment in an appropriate way, as opposed to a more closed system where the information can come in, but it can't escape as well. And therefore, there's too much over-orderliness in that system.
Oh, so we kind of need to be able to learn to drop the expectations of what we're about to experience. I mean, we all know disappointment comes from unrealistic expectations. Without those expectations, you can dodge disappointment. But I believe there's a lot of where we get stuck. Like I have expectations of what I need to present or what people are expecting of me, and I have expectations of what they want. And a lot of that noise then just totally changes things. If you drop all those expectations and just take the moment. So that's all about living in the now, really, isn't it?
It is, and maintaining a peripheral awareness all the time while you're doing things like, so... Yes, of course, right, sitting here now, I'm focused on what you're saying, but only to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I'm aware that Matt's getting up and looking at the camera every now and then and doing all these other types of things.
I forgot about it.
So we're, it's having that, maintaining a more general awareness of it. So it's not just, everything's just so foveal all the time. It's just bringing that proof.
And that's when you use the analogy of those flock of birds, So like if they were focused on their own flight path, and trying to remember the choreography, they just bump into each other.
That's right, yeah.
So they're just obviously acknowledging the space around them and moving with the flow.
All they're doing is communicating with their nearest neighbour. So it comes into what we call nearest neighbour principle. So they're just the people who are closest to them, but then they're communicating with their nearest neighbours, and then it just collectively as a whole they exhibit all these beautiful patterns. So there's no one burden there's no one burden that's telling everybody what to do. It's just self-organisation within the environment. And when you sit there and you have, you're checking your background tone, check your background tone in your body when you're driving your car.
Yeah.
Is there increased vigilance in my adductors and all that sort of thing as I'm driving? Because that's a symptom of something.
Yeah.
And it's keeping that...
See, man, if I whack a tree, if I hit a tree and damage a tree, it'll just those fibres just kind of reorganise later on.
Yes.
I leave a knot in the wood.
Yep.
Where that trauma may have occurred, but as the tree progresses, it actually just goes around that and just joins back into its natural fibre. It doesn't actually splay out and all of a sudden that knot in the wood becomes this massive wedge in the tree.
That's right, and that's it's getting along definitely towards a good way of describing the emotional leakage that can take place there, where a perturbation occurs, and then all of a sudden the person bifurcates out into some other type of thing, and it's hard to get back on track with the system.
Well, in my naturopath consultations, one thing I often try to get out of someone is I've never been the same since. I try to hear that phrase, or I try to lead them towards a point myself. I've never been the same since that trauma. I've never been the same since that virus or something like that. And I try to take them back to that point and go, well, I wonder what happened. Let's see if we can kind of reboot and recalibrate from whatever went pear-shaped in that instance. So really, that should never be said. Like, we should never have that in our brain that I've never been the same since.
No, Matt, but again, what the event that occurs is usually the end result of a whole heap of other things that have been building up at a period of time. So it just reaches that tipping point, and then all of a sudden, thump, off it goes. So it was just heading along a certain trajectory, and then it reached some critical mass, some incident occurred, and that's the result of it.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't use any RE words in biology. You can't rewire the brain. You can only ever take something from its present state and move forward with it.
Yeah.
So you say, okay, yes, you've taken this deviation, but what do we need to do to sort of get
Bring
that
it
vehicle
back.
back on track again?
Yeah.
And of course, they've got to be able to have a percept of what life is going to be like. It's never going to be the same as what it was before.
Yep.
People come and they might have broke down with their running, and something's happened, and I want to go back to running the way that I used to. Well, you can't.
Yeah.
You perhaps can even run better.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It's like it's not.
You can't go back to where you were. Yeah.
You just got to look at the system from its present state, and yes, how it got there can be, a person got their history can be important in lots of ways. It can inform us who we are and how we got there and whatever. But it is about moving forward and what's the goals and objectives of the future.
Yeah.
So. If you're doing up old vehicles, for example, and you went down to New South Wales and you pulled this old thing out of the grass and brought it back home, put it in the garage at home, you're not thinking about who spewed in the front seat in 1964 or whatever. All you're looking at, what do I need to do and buy and do all the things I need to do to get this vehicle the way I want it to look.
Yeah.
So it's always forwardness, and that's the way that we've got to look at things. We can't keep talking about history and all that stuff. Yeah.
And like we always talk about, it's just trying to live in the now.
Yeah.
And, the stuff of the past and things for the future don't actually exist.
Yeah.
So,
that's right. And it's all very nice to say and that, but it's like, how can we prove that? How can we actually demonstrate, how the person can demonstrate that they are very present, they're in the now, that they're becoming impervious to perturbation. So let's just say imagine you're doing that exercise the other day that I had on that pec fly, for example. Imagine if you're in that state and all of a sudden I bumped the machine.
Yeah.
What do you think the likely result of that would have been?
Oh, I don't know.
You probably would have,
I would have panicked. It would have had to reassess really quickly.
Whereas as time goes on, you could have 10 plates on there and be doing nice, and somebody could come and bump the machine. It would go relatively unnoticed.
Well, I know the feeling of just that, when you just slightly pushed back on me, and I fully thought I was going to fall over. Right. There was no way that I could trust someone with my eyes closed to make sure I don't fall.
That's right. But, but it's that impervious to the perturbation. So if you find that there would probably be more of an extreme reaction. But as time goes on, you've learned to be in a state, being present. So somebody could come along and hit the machine, and you'd sort of open an eye. What was that? It wouldn't go. It wouldn't.
And like we were saying, using that analogy before, like when you are in nature and you've got to move a log. I just did that again. I dropped my hands below the desk. Every time I talk about moving a log, I drop my hands to my lap. But was that Freudian slip? When you're trying to move that log in nature, there's multiple variables. So you wouldn't go and attack that thing thinking, right, I know it's going to weigh. I know I can lift 100 kilos. This thing's going to be 110, so I'm going to just hit it with more intensity and I'll be able to move it. No, you've got no idea what it's going to weigh and whether it's attached somewhere or banging into something. So you go in with control.
Well, you're sensible. You do that, but a lot of people don't do that. So their systems are in this angst state, and then they go to do something like that, and of course, then now we've got a problem. Now that something.
But when I go to the gym, I'm taught to use these weights at this many reps. And I know when I go up to weight, I'm going to have to swing it a bit harder, to get there. So these are the things. And then, of course, that's where I end up with injuries.
Yeah.
So with your elite athletes and stuff like that and your entrepreneurs, you could, by removing fear, I don't see any... It's all perspective. So, for example, a big wave surfer may have a certain amount of anxiety leading when he sees this wave coming before he catches the wave. That may be the same degree of anxiety and worry that not a people person like myself might have going into a meeting. So our bodies could manifest exactly the same stuff because pretty much I'm a big wave surfer is what I'm saying.
That's and then it becomes an associative experience, Matt, that your system, next time you go to a meeting, you're more likely to behave that way. But Mark Matthews, for example, we've done a bit of work with, so he was so fearful of the water and the surf when he was young. He was telling me a story about at one stage he was out the back when he was 9 years of age or something, and somebody had to go out and get it to bring him in. But it was his fear of that actually drove the mechanism to becoming the world's,
be a big wave surfer.
one of the world's best big wave surfers. So it's never about the elimination of fear.
Yeah,
it's about the control of fear. Yeah. And nature doesn't give us any of these emotions to cause us harm. It's just there to help us make better decisions about what we need to do, fear and anxiety and so forth. So there's evolutionary advantages to these things. It's just that when we don't have control over that, anger, getting angry at the right time can be very beneficial.
Yeah,
but it's when you can't control anger, that's another thing altogether. So it is about, like fluctuation in our environment is fluctuation in intensities all of the time. It's how stable, physically and emotionally stable we can stay while all these fluctuations are going on.
Yeah.
So if a person sees you at 5 o'clock in the morning and they see you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 8 o'clock at night, you're pretty much the same type of person.
Wow. Yeah. And so the funny thing is with our body unable to wait to see what the stressor is before we react. Some people, it might be aircon, it might be the weird lights, it might be the Wi-Fi, electromagnetic radiation, the fact that the phone won't stop ringing, and then when that person does come in, they may not be giving that person the best attention because they're stuck in survival mode from all these things.
Yeah.
But in the executive brain, they're thinking, it's that person that turned up. They bug me,
Yeah.
But if they didn't have all that other stress, that person wouldn't bug them. So the way I think, and for you with an entrepreneur, the ability to go and teach people techniques to actually quieten the noise and allow their body to work efficiently, it's going to be so useful across so many levels. It doesn't just have to be an elite athlete. And don't wait until you've really injured yourself to come and see you.
Yeah, that's right.
So what is the best way? So it's the NeuroPhysics Institute. Just look up Ken Ware.
Yeah, that's as far as that's concerned. I mean, we the centres in Sydney and Perth and the likes, and New Zealand and that as well. But the point of contact is always best to they come to us, and then we can sort of look at what we need to do to filter that out to whoever's going to be best, Matt. But it's and
not like what I did. So ideally, invest a week or something into it, do 4 days, for a couple of hours every day.
For intensive therapy, yes. If there's something that needs addressing in a much more serious manner, but a lot of the times again, elite athletes' performance, that we do 4 hours of 2 hours, 2 hours each day, 4 days, of 2 hours of each day. And that gets to the point where then we can start to build their program after that. So getting rid of all the noise, working through all the grids, stabilising their system, getting that sense of robustness and the likes, and then we maintain contact with them, because it's like a fly in, fly. We don't have people staying there all the time to do it.
Well, I remember Jeff. I was talking to Jeff Erickson the other day. So he was a former boxer, and he got. He came to see you to recalibrate, or not anything. But he came to see you for a treatment.
Yes.
And then I was talking to him the other day, and he said he got remarkable results and that sort of stuff. And then he felt like he wasn't getting to that level, and he had to go and remind himself of the lessons he learned and actually go back and do his homework. Yes. And now all of a sudden he's capable of maintaining the results he achieved in those intensive workouts.
That's great. It becomes a really powerful reference point. And people will, especially, like I said, when you get into the program 6, where they're doing all those sets of 30s and the likes, people can hate it while they're going through it. And even though the weight's really light and all they're being asked to do is go slow, a lot of the times, like elite athletes have said, and the people who are used to training really hard, they'll say, that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. Now you're living with yourself for this extended period of time, and all that stuff's coming back out. And people might go off the rails for a little bit, and the common thing, they'll come back and say, I think I really need to go back and do some of those super slows, because they relate it to a time in their life when they started to be able to get rid of noise off their system and control arousal and all that type of thing, and then they'll say, that feels a lot better, so they're stabilised again.
And so now we'll delete this if Jeff doesn't want us to talk about it. I'll ask him. But he originally came to see you for memory loss stuff, or that sort of stuff of boxing. He just came for physical stuff?
No, it's just more the physical type of things. No,
but now he's an entrepreneur with his own business successfully.
Jeff was always very smart. It's sort of a little bit like the stigma I've suffered a lot with bodybuilding. Where a lot of people think about the boxers. Jeff's very smart. Some of the math that he has to do for this thermal imaging analysis is just insane. He's very smart, a very astute person, and
so coming to see you, he did a lot of that physical work and fixed that, but it's actually opened up a hell of a lot more than just improved physical functioning on day. He's now got not only the motivation and the skills and that, but he was telling me that even at one stage his business was not going so great. He went back and did all your physical stuff, and all of a sudden his business took off again.
Yeah, that's right. Because it's the same thing, like where you're calibrating your emotional self at the same time, through some what would be people perceive as physical realm. So getting that stable point, and then from there clarity starts to come about again. And there's a difference between, like I said, being under a stress, and then learning how to cognitively, control that stress. That is transferable to all aspects of a person's life.
Yep.
Everything has to be transferable, otherwise there's no point.
Yeah.
And that's what the concern is about the way that a lot of these athletes train, is that the transferability of that, like if they're going, for all this aggression, how do they stop that out in their real world?
Yeah.
When they come across the red light, or their relationship at home and their partner says something to them. And so, like I said, the investment of energy that's got to go back into normalising the person after those experiences, where we need to be able to go to the gym, train intensely, under control, walk out of there feeling good, and not be a different person.
Yeah. You're right. I know what you mean. Like we always, again, I think I read too many books, and they're written by people that are people. And they were successful, so you try to learn things from them, but you end up being schizophrenic. You actually forget who you are. You're either intensely doing this like an athlete with angst, or you're over here studying like an entrepreneur, where you're tricking yourself into thinking all I want to do is study and read this. Yeah, that's crazy.
And like everyone's got their own stamp, and one of the things that I think anybody should like to hear played at their funeral, if we wish, is that I did it my way. That song, to be able to not take notice of what the status is saying. We hear the old famous half glass of water, is it half full, half empty? And God, people.
I got some water.
They got jobs because they said it was half full, and another person didn't get the job because they said it was half empty. So this type of mentality because it was a popular thing at a time to say.
Yeah.
So I remember speaking at an AMP national conference, and I was about 2 weeks away from a major bodybuilding competition I was going, so my tolerance was pretty low at that point. And the speaker before me was doing the half glass of water type of thing, and it just so happened that my talk was about that same thing. And I said, only a fool would nominate one of those states without inquiring as to how it got in that state. Yeah. What was the goal and objective of this thing? You could write a 30-minute essay about all the possible states that glass could be in.
Yeah.
Rather than just saying it's half. So was the goal to fill it up? Therefore, it was only half accomplished. Therefore, was it to half empty the glass?
And how big is this glass anyway?
You got to know about what the initial conditions were. What was going on, and so
which direction you were heading.
So you don't take notice of the popular.
It's like I read a meme the other day because I'm obsessed with memes now, and it says, "Don't judge me by the chapter you walked in on." Yeah. So with your half a glass, you don't know. Am I trying to empty this glass and I've already drunk half of it? You little ripper, I'm winning.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
I get it.
But they become popular and become social hypnosis or professional hypnosis, and there's all these type of books that people read, and then they whether it's digital marketing, and they say the data and the research shows blah 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 blah, and it's all this hypnosis that takes place. Yeah. Where if you look at the fluctuations on the stock exchange, for example, over the last 30 years, for example, you see that path that actually takes.
Yeah.
And that's a very non-linear type of thing. So if you're making you're doing your business planning, and you're happen to be doing that at some time scale up here, and then all of a sudden there's some massive fluctuation in whatever takes place, then that business plan means nothing, because now we're down here.
Yeah, exactly.
So everything you're doing in terms of planning has to have plasticity, alpha plasticity to be able to be responsive and adapting, to be able to adapt within your environment, whether it's a business model you have. And I love the way that you've done it, Matt, because there's a whole heap of self-organisation that's taken place from when you first started your business, which I was asking about before. There has been a lot of, it's a trendy word to you, but that organic sort of development take place.
Yeah.
In response to the information that you got from the environment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it had to be adaptive, had to be fluid. The amount of times in our business that we were told we should forget everything and focus on this.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh, if we had it, we'd be gone.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that's amazing. So what I'm hoping today is what we'll do is we'll post up a heap of the information on how to find you and how to do your stuff. Don't wait until you're in a wheelchair. But if you are in a wheelchair and all that sort of stuff, then find Ken. You need him. But I keep believing that the most amazing benefit that you could achieve, if I was to be anyone and thinking, how do I get the most out of this? It would be someone that's already pretty good. And I can imagine just how awesome you could make someone, taking them from good, just removing the handbrakes from there and allowing them every time they push the throttle to achieve the acceleration they're expecting. You know, I think that's where the most opportunity lies for what you're doing. And I think there's a lot of people out there that would benefit greatly from what you're doing and have no idea. They think that it's not for them. It's for the wheelchair people, you know. But that's not the case, hey?
Definitely not that. And we definitely...
and I don't mean to offend you if I say wheelchair people. I don't mean that to be offensive.
but we definitely sort of started to get back into that whole, you know, looking at the elite athletes and everything. So, you know, I've got some very smart people that are coming on board that are very much in that space, and we're sort of going to get, because I'm an athlete at the end of the day myself, and I want to definitely work in that area. And when we're looking at getting this out there in terms of attracting people to the course and doing the training education, a lot of people, that's when you're talking about spinal cord injury, that's just way too complex for them, and higher levels of disease and disorders. It's just too.
It's heavy.
Yeah, it's heavy. But when you're just talking about average person just wanting to improve the quality and function of their life, and to talk about athletes and getting into that sports type of atmosphere, where we have Rennie Matua on one of the testimonials that he did, making the comment that the first NRL club that actually gets their hands on this is going to be
I was at the Brisbane Broncos yesterday, and they're very interested.
Right.
Because and the classic one, like Matt Gillette recently broke his neck, which he doesn't seem to think is a big deal. But what he is concerned about is he's come back to training and tore his calf.
That's right.
He's never had a calf issue, and he wasn't doing anything with it. He was just doing a little running thing.
Yep.
And all of a sudden he's torn his calf. And he's like, how the hell?
That's
like,
right.
Well, obviously, break your neck, weird stuff's going to happen.
That's right. And that's, again, you've got to look at the systems. It's a systems issue. The calf doesn't have a brain; it can't tear itself. It's got a there's a whole systems-wide effects that actually lead to that type of that phenomena occurring, and it gets back to Matt. If we've got a little bit more time, we could talk about the seamlessness. Yeah. This whole thing about the training, when I'm talking about they're lifting the weights up, and when these researchers some time ago were studying the dynamics of the bicep. As people were doing this, well, there's a realisation that once you get past about 71 degrees, that there's nothing really happening. You're just moving across that linear space. But what they've seen was when there's a transition from the concentric to the eccentric and vice versa, that there's points in there where nothing's actually happening. So it's showing up in the EMG signals. So they said that was normal, like it's just something normal. That's not normal. That's an anomaly. Like I said, human beings are the only animals that behave in that type of fashion, as opposed to kangaroos that were in captivity, where they had EMGs on them, and these researchers were looking for the mighty fast twitch responses. They startled the kangaroos, and they were sort of amazed to see that they didn't see these spikes. When that's what they're expecting, but they've seen it something like a bit of more of a continual flow.
So when we do things, we had a start and a finish.
Yeah, but it follows this up down type of thing. We need something that looks much more flowing. But the point is that these anomalies get built into the system under significant stress. So they're lifting heavier weights, and so these anomalies start to show up in their nervous system, how their nervous system is dealing with the environment. So now we've got to we're looking at ways of explaining what happens to the athlete who shot that basketball hoop thousands of times before. This time they hit the ground and the ACL pops out.
Yeah.
And what took place? Is it an ACL issue? Certainly not.
Yeah.
It's a systems issue. So there's a loss of integrity in that system. So what happens this time, my argument is that the information, they hit the ground, the information up to the brain with responses within, well, not so much the brain, but the whole system, responses to where it came across one of these anomalies where nothing's actually happening.
Yeah.
And that's what we collapsed. So they're dynamical states.
Yeah.
If you could watch it all in slow motion, some type of beautiful graphic where you could see, inside the nervous system as it shot that bar and then came back down and hit it, you'd see that the error occurred
during an anomaly.
This was just the vulnerable point that it actually it's shot out from.
Yeah.
So in reality, like I said, that's been programmed. Why did the person put their foot out the car door and their back pop out? They've done that thousands of times before.
Yeah.
You know, so you can't just, you know, fob it off and say, oh, well, you know, you've done this and done that.
And do you think that sometimes that the energy might be taken somewhere else because of you're focused somewhere else, or like maybe it's a fear response, or are we stuck up in here because we're anxious or something?
There could have been parts of that led to.
I'm not expecting anyone to know these things, and
no.
I think sometimes science does itself a disjustice by trying to explain the mechanism of action sometimes. I think it's kind of cool to see results and see what actually happens, and then go back and look at the mechanism of actions and try to work it out. But don't, you know, sometimes we try to explain things we don't understand, and that's when people go, oh, I don't believe your explanation, I'm throwing the whole thing out.
That's
know?
Right.
So,
I mean, you've got to be a lot of reverse engineering. I mean, I've seen a phenomenon occurring all the time. Saying, why does that happen? Why is that so consistent with every human being all of the time instead of some of the people, some of the time? You know, it's that consistencies, and, you know, what are those consistencies across all human beings, as opposed to, you know, looking at the mechanics of exercise, the mechanics of eating, and, you know, the anti-aging and all those sort of things which dominate that space. You know, our posture, attention to posture, the regulation of our emotional integrity based around, you know, the attention that we pay to posture, for example, how we elaborate on our environment, and you know, again, in developing more complex behaviours and responses to it, how we perceive our environment. It's all through those landscapes. So they're all intimately connected. Posture, emotions, environment, very intimately connected together. You don't see depressed people walking through shopping centres, chest out, shoulders back, you know, looking small if they're looking good. They have a certain posture that maintains that certain metabolic state within their system.
Man, and how much does that posture look like someone playing on a phone?
Yeah, exactly. And as we say, it's the same type of the harvesting of information from the environment. You know, when we have our posture up and we're alert and we're all perky and all that, you know, all those growth factors and all those wonderful things are flying through the system. Yeah. And it's regulating us emotionally and
so that defensive posture, or that sad posture, or that depressed posture, I mean, that's typically rolled over shoulders, hunchback, tight traps, you know, clenched jaw, protect the heart, close your mouth. Don't look around. Very similar posture to what we're doing when we're working on a computer, playing with our phones and doing all that sort of stuff. So sometimes can it be the other way? So we can be stuck in a physical posture that will change our brain, like somatopsychic?
Absolutely. I mean, there's researchers were doing this other experiment one time to see how the brain learns from the face, for example. So one group of students they had where they held a pencil in their between their teeth. So when they did that, it sort of elicited a bit of a clenching type of thing. The other group of students held it between their lips. So sorry, it was the other way. When they put it between their teeth, it sort of produced a bit of a smile. I was incorrect. When they put it between their lips and held it between that was like a frown. So got that bit right. Now, and they were watching, you know, videos of certain things, but the interpretation of what the people had with between their teeth with the smile was markedly different to the interpretation the other ones had. So, you know, our brain, that's why I said to you when you're doing your thing, take the frown off you. Because it's a perception that something's not right.
And my mind when you said that, I was like, but I'm concentrating.
My
brain was thinking, no, I frown when I concentrate.
But it's over concentrating.
That's so right. Maybe so when people see me working, they know I'm concentrating.
That's right. And so it's all that type of those mechanisms there where, you know, smiling. You know, I've 2 times in my life I've been confronted with people who walked up to me and said to me, "Oh, you really love yourself, don't you? You think yourself really good." And you sort of get taken back a bit because when I walk around, I guess there's a bit of a smile on my face. I'm feeling pretty good about things. I don't really think about it. That's just how I am. And you know, I was so taken back the first time I sort of was speechless. And thought, why would somebody think that? I mean, but the second time I was probably a little bit more prepared and spontaneous. And I said, well, you know, they said, "Oh, you really love yourself, don't you?" I said, "Well, actually, I do. You know, would you feel better if I said I don't?" Or something? Yeah, thought so.
It's funny, eh?
So it's, oh wow, you know, but
Oh, that's something to be ashamed of. You can't go around loving yourself like that.
But we've had to help elite athletes who've become really good at what they do. So therefore, the media starts following them around, and so they start walking through shopping centres and they've got sunglasses on. They're trying to hide themselves because they don't want to be, people coming up to annoy them. And so what their brain is learning is that when I'm in public and there are all these people around, I adopt this defensive type of posture.
Yeah.
So when they run out on the field to play their sport, the brain goes, there's people around, so it starts to manifest these similar associative things. So they've got to relearn, and we're saying to them, you'll be surprised that when you walk through a shopping centre, you get yourself up, chest out, shoulders back, walk through like you own the place. You'll be surprised how little people come up.
Because growing up in a place like Mackay, where it's a small town and a relatively small town, and people would know you, just going to get groceries and that sort of stuff as a naturopath could be quite a challenge, where people would want to see what sort of stuff you buy or have a discussion about everything and tell me and show me their rash.
That's right.
And so typically I adapted some techniques where I actually walk with purpose.
Yes.
Where I look like I'm on a mission and I'm busy.
That's right.
And I'll lean forward and I'll frown and I'll be going, sometimes pen and paper, and that way people would leave me alone.
Yes. Yeah.
So I can see how these celebrities or elite athletes and things like that might actually adapt these physical traits to just create a bit of a space around them, So but that can then manifest and change their brain, huh?
It changes the way they interact with their environment at other scales.
Yeah.
And it's like we briefed upon the postures that people have when they're on their technology. And I was down in Sydney not long ago, and I was pointing out to one of my students, looking at the behaviour of this other person. We were having breakfast there, and she was on her computer and all hunched up, and you could see her anxiously trying to get rid of these emails. So here she is in a social setting.
Yeah.
Her brain doesn't know her anxiety is attached to the details of what she's emailing. It just has this associative experience. So it's the environment that's causing her anxiety.
Yeah.
So then next time, at some other stage, she could be there with her friends and feel anxious and not know why.
Yeah. Well, hey, this is a thing because, I mentioned earlier we talked about time management. If you want to be an entrepreneur or an elite athlete, it's about dedicating the time and sacrificing and things like that. 20 years ago, even probably 10 years ago, but 20 years ago, that was like kind of dedicating yourself to going into the study or reading a book or doing something. Now with social media, now with phones, now with emails popping up on your phone, there is zero balance in regards to there is always an opportunity to be working. And at any moment, you should be really doing this. This whole need so these people feeling obligated to contribute all the content to Facebook to become a zillionaire. You know what I mean? I mean, can you think that you could believe there's a platform that's been built that everyone else has made, everyone else has created the contact, everyone else is working there hard and feeling crazy obligated to be contributing content to this platform constantly for their own worth.
Yep.
Like, it is crazy. There is no escape.
Yes.
Now, every once in a while, I'll be doing something. I'm positive I feel my phone buzz.
Oh, that's
like, I'm
that's
positive, I feel it and I pull it out. It's like there's nothing. But there's been a certain period of time I haven't checked my phone for a while and I feel obligated. Before I do that, I actually feel a buzz, like a buzz in my pocket. Is that something real?
That's a phenomenon. Like you can Google that. It's sort of 90% of what the phantom phone ring. I've experienced exactly the same thing. And it came about. Because I never used to bother carrying my mobile phone around too much, but just from a couple of little experiences, maybe two times when I actually had it in my pocket and that happened. Yeah. So then it becomes like you can have some type of expectation somebody's going to ring or whatever, and then you get that sort of sensation. But it is a phenomenon. Like you can.
But every time I'll be like, get that phone out, because for me, like the phone for me is not a social thing. It's a work thing.
Yes.
So I'll get that out and I'll immediately acquire my work posture. Okay? Maybe, so people around me don't think I'm playing my phone. I'm working on my phone. Yes. I do this when I'm working. You can tell because I frown and I hunch my shoulders,
Yes, sure.
Like, it's a weird ass thing, hey? So it's really hard for us to have balance. So people now actually going to have to work a hell of a lot harder to acquire a balance, not only because these devices and that sort of stuff can constantly be reminding us there's other things we should be doing, but also the fact that they're attached to a Wi-Fi, which potentially could be a stressor anyway. We are actually really going to have to dedicate time or put time in your calendar to get off that grid.
Devote time to it, and like I said, it's not work hard. It's just about being smarter about it and realise that there's consequences where we become the victim of our own animosities and our own things. So being able to evaluate yourself and having some reference for that. When people are coming with comments, we're saying to them, "Come on, just relax." But I am relaxed, and they have no idea. No, you're not. Like, you're still really tensed up in the traps. But so they don't even have. A couple of times it's been said to me when I'm tapping them on the traps, "Come on, just relax," and they say, "Oh, can you do that?"
Yeah, right.
Where they become so disassociated from their body that they don't even realise that they actually have the power to relax their trapeze.
That's an interesting way of saying it too, the power to relax. It's always like, you've got to you've got to consciously do that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, see, for example, my work calendar is full of work events. When I don't have a calendar full of work events, I can think about doing something else.
Exactly, yeah.
But that stuff's not in my calendar. My calendar's full of work, and the rest of the time, if I can find balance, I'll do that.
Yeah, Matt. That's
so
right.
You're saying that, like, these people. So for me, it's like you're either tensing, or by default, you'd be relaxing.
Yeah.
But sometimes we need to actually force our brain to tell our body to relax as an intended purpose.
And try, but without overthinking. But just being a little bit more. You're driving your car. You're going through the shopping centre. It's all just making some checks on your arousal. And keeping yourself where there's some level of control. Like I said, just the vigilance. When we first came down from Emerald and down to the Gold Coast, for example, it was probably a little while before I realised that when I was actually driving on the freeways and all that I actually discovered that my left leg had this like preparedness, like it was a bit of tension in there.
Yeah.
I went, wow, now that's costing energy. So it's relating to the fact that now my system doesn't have all the energy it needs to regulate itself properly, but it's like this preparedness where you're almost bracing yourself for anticipation that something was going to happen.
Yep.
So it took a little while to be driving the car and be aware of that wasn't taking place. But that's just one small example of the levels of background tone that people actually have in their body, where they're just in this defensive state all the time. And it's that state of protection. Yeah. And that's when all that immune system, what's the immune system for? Well, it's for protection.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but with the way the body works, you can't separate it from any other system.
No, that's right.
It's an innate survival mechanisms, you know? Wow. This is cool, man. Is there anything else in particular you wanted to say to us today? Because I probably should wrap it up. I could chat to you for days, and I probably will.
Well, we can. We're going to have some other time. But there's a massive amount of things there that can give guidance and to help people, but it is this whole bigger, stronger, faster world that we live in today, and we, there's a certain amount of momentum that goes with that. We can't probably change that ourselves individually, but we really need to sort of start looking at what we can do to change our behaviour within those landscapes, and to be able to think of where do I want to be in 5 years' time, where do I want to be in 10 years' time. And that's very much dependent on what you're actually doing right here today. Yeah. And you say, well, if things aren't going so well, and this is the trajectory that I seem to be on, what's that going to look like further down the track? So we've got to sometime have some braking mechanism to be able to self-set and smell the roses and do all those sort of things. Yeah.
And with the brain, it's so confused and it's so biased. It's better to work with an independent person like yourself, or it's better to work with I don't know, about to call you a therapist then, I don't know what the hell, but you're better off working with someone like yourself that can actually help to remove the noise. So you're not sitting there analysing the whole time going, is it this, is it, or is it that? It's just basically, no, you just stop thinking for a bit, I'll tell you what to do. You take that stress and you can help them create change where they might have been stuck.
That's right, but they have ownership over it. Yeah. Like they own the result at the end of the day, because they're the ones doing it. Yes, we're standing there telling them what they need to do, making online corrections to when we see things come up that shouldn't be there, but they're having that ownership. They're going with the flow, having people do their own proprioception testing at home, where they can close their eyes and bring their fingers together, and they can sort of see fingers to nose, that type of stuff. It starts to see that, gee whiz, that's not looking as well as what it should, and understanding that the errors there are consistent with all the other errors that are going on in their system. But correcting simple things like that means that they're making some corrections across we can say now we can see that neurons in the brain are firing differently to how they were before.
Yeah.
We can see that there's been a measurable change of behaviour take place.
And the good news is you're not a magician.
No.
This is something that you've actually worked out how to teach other people to do. Mm-hmm. Even like if there is an NRL club out there that wants to be the first person using this technique, they could even send their medical team to you to learn the techniques.
Yeah, exactly.
Get a whole new set of skills that their club could use.
That's right. I mean, and it can be broken down to bits and pieces. Like there's certain things that would be relevant to certain settings, of course. So we don't need to go the whole 9 yards and with everything. But there's certain things that are relevant to those settings, and and at the end of the day, I mean, we all tend to take ourselves a bit too serious at times. So having fun is probably the number one priority with it all.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant, Ken. Hey, thank you so much for coming up. We will be doing it again. Yeah, and I'm definitely coming down to do that intensive thing. What I'm trying to do is for all of all the directors to actually get a week off and go and do it.
That would be
and
wonderful,
just do it properly and do that, and then follow up with our homework and everything after. I think it would make a massive difference to our company, as a whole.
Yeah.
I think anyone else out there that is looking for something to help them break through a barrier they're stuck at, I think this is an excellent idea. And I actually think before I did anything else, like if I was to think of all these other different modalities, I would recommend anyone go to you first to kind of rattle all that stuff loose so that they know the handbrakes are gone so they can move forward.
Thank you, Matt. It's been wonderful being on the show. I love coming up and having these chats with you, and we get to talk about some really good stuff. And the listeners might appreciate the fact that we have known one another for quite some time, so it's always a pretty comfortable conversation.
Yeah.
But yes, so thank you very much, and like I said, there's always plenty more to talk about.
That's going to be fun. All right, mate. Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt.